All right. Guys, we are back with the Chasing Better with Knoxy podcast. My name is Dylan. I've just been converted to AFL. And Knoxy is the West Coast Eagles' biggest supporter, even when they're absolutely rubbish this year. So anyway, welcome back to the podcast, guys. And today we got a really good subject. Okay, so we're on the topic of mental health. In particular, the Are You Okay Day and just the conversation around that. And so, Knoxy, man, I know this is a conversation that is close to your heart. What brought up this conversation, man?
Well, being a coach when you're dealing with people's health and fitness, a lot of that you end up being a psychologist. Like, I know I'm not actually trained as a psychologist, of course, but you end up having so many conversations around mental health without even realizing it at first, that once you start to tune into it, you hear enough of the same problems, issues, daily struggles, and things like that, that as a coach, when you want to try and help people be better, especially with their lifting or their nutrition or weight loss or whatever, if the head's not in it, it's just not going to work, right? As we know, the body essentially gets directed by the brain, right? So if the brain's heading in the wrong direction and you're going backwards, well, then you're probably going to go backwards. So I think because I've had so many of those conversations, I've started to, especially in the last probably 2 to 3 years, started to look more into like, how can I help people just get through just basic mental health struggles? Like, again, not saying I have to fix, ADHD or anything like that, or fix depression necessarily. But use my voice of chasing better to actually start tying in some mental health strategies that people can use. Because it's part of the better message, right?
Absolutely. And I remember I used to be a CrossFitter of all things, which I'm glad I've moved on from that now and seen the light. But one of the Greg Glassman, and excuse me using his name because I know he's a controversial figure, but he said the greatest adaptation of CrossFit was the one between the brain, one between the ears, the muscle between the ears. And often it was the mental side of things that actually was the big, winner from CrossFit, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, we train a lot of women at our gym, as most gyms do, especially when they're private training facilities. Like, usually females will be the higher number. And I mean, your gym's the same. You guys do Evolved over in Queensland, so it's all ladies. But a common theme that always comes up when we do things like check-ins or just having a chat with the guys before class, for example, like, I love to ask, like, why are you training today? Like, and it might be someone that's trained with me for like 4 years, but I'll still be like, why are you training today? Like, what's going to get you through hitting that PB today, or making sure you do 8 squats when it's meant to be, 8, not 7 or whatever. Like, what's going to get you through that? And a lot of the time the answer is like, this is my happy place. And like, I don't have to worry about anything else when I'm between these 4 walls. And I'm like, well, that's sick. Like, that's really cool. And at first I used to think, oh, well, all right, that's cool. Like, it's a happy place for him. But you start to realize that a lot of people, unfortunately, and it can sound a bit sad at first, but a lot of people just don't have good outlets, and they don't, you're very big as a coach on, planning in release time, or, what do you call it? Like self-management time, all that sort of stuff. Where you can actually, chill out and read a book and not be distracted by the phone or getting calls from work or anything like that. Like, all that sort of recovery time, I think, is probably the best kind of like overall label to put on it. Is like, the brain needs recovery too. And, when it's under stress all day and you're pumping 12-hour days at work instead of 10 because of COVID, or, your partner's never seeing you because he's going to have to, go work FIFO and all this sort of stuff. So you only see him, half the year when you break it down, because of the swings and stuff. You start to realize that a lot of people, they start to lose sight of like what a nice or a relaxed day looks like. And that's a big deal when it comes to actually just getting through a normal work week, let alone the weekend as well. Because if that brain's never allowed to turn off or relax, like we're in this constant heightened state of either fear or stress or anger or, sadness or whatever. And then when people actually get asked the question, like, why do you train? They're like, oh, well, actually my head's clear when I'm in here. And I'm like, well, that's cool. Does that happen anywhere else? And they're like, no. And that's when I started to kind of look a bit more into the mental health side of things over these last couple of years, is because I can now have more in-depth conversations with people. And it's not to say, hey, I'm going to be your relationship counselor, but I can at least chat with people about issues without them having to go into like the full background depth story. But it allows them to kind of get some stuff off their chest, and they start to realize like little habits of like journals, diary writing and stuff like that. That's a really common practice I use with some of my guys that just can't turn their brains off for whatever reason, because it gets the crap out of here and it's on paper then. And you can always come back to it. You can always, store it somewhere. You can do it, but it's no longer in the front of your brain 24/7. And the power of that is so good for just getting people to realize that it's not the end of the world if you turn your phone off. It's not the end of the world if you actually have a day off from work. That's time with your family. You actually go out and enjoy a movie for the first time in 6 months, or just something like that, where you just actually get to switch off from the grind. And yeah, like, I mean, I saw a really great podcast yesterday where someone was talking about the fact that people at the moment, especially young people like age 20 to 30, are in this constant state of grind already, but they don't actually, like, they haven't even lived yet, like they've come out of uni or school, and all of a sudden it's like, I have to be perfect. I have to have the best job by the time I'm like mid-20s, otherwise I'm behind. And it's like, that's such a wrong message, because like, studies are coming out to show that, the human brain still isn't even fully like developed at that stage, right? Like, people are still experimenting, and, what does it feel like to have more than one job, right? Like, how many people do you know, Dylan, for example, that like leave school or they finish school or whatever, and then they just go and work retail?
Yeah.
Right? Like they streamline into that, and it's like, cool, now you're in management of retail, and now you're a store owner. And it's like, you've never known anything else. And it's like,
and it is, man. And like, it was funny, I was just listening, because I was almost like, sometimes that whole thing, you're almost talking to me a little bit, where I've been on the grind most of my life, and it really is, man. And I think now, as I'm getting older, and like, and this is like last night, for example, we had I know I just feel so blessed lately, and it's quite funny because I train a lot of young athletes, like they're in their 20s, mid-20s, and it's funny because their life now is just training, just sports, just all of that stuff, and now it's like, they still enjoy going out, have a bit of a party on the weekend. And like I said to them the other night, I was like, it's funny because now that I'm like 36, I actually just feel really lucky to know you guys, like to have mates, and it's like, I've never really had that, because I was always just sort of trying to improve or trying to grow to that next level, and just having that little bit of time. And one of the girls came over last night, and it was her birthday, and it was just really nice to actually have that little bit of difference in time. And my partner Jess, she's very, very good at this, about giving me that time, or reminding me to have those little times to have that bit of space, and it's actually really nice. And it is a big thing these days, especially, we have all this external pressure, and I like that you highlighted that, because ultimately we still are very young people, and we got a bit of time, so why not enjoy it along the way, eh?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the crazy thing about it, right? Like, I've got clients of mine that work in aged care at the moment. So obviously, COVID, post-COVID, whatever you want to put it as, like, they have been annihilated this last 2 years. Like, anyone in the healthcare sector, for example, as we know, has just been absolutely walking zombies, to put it lightly. And that's very lightly, to be honest. But not to go into the specifics of that, but the crazy thing with that is, I had a breakthrough with one of our clients this week, when she actually because she's been doing like 6-day, 7-day weeks sometimes. And then twice actually during the pandemic, she actually worked like 13-day weeks. So like 13 days straight. And she would get to the end of that 13 days and she'd come into the gym and she's like, cool, I can finally train today. I'm like, you've been here 4 days this week. What are you talking about? She's like, no, I can actually train today. Like, I'm not working. And I was like, wow, that's not good. Like that's not good that training has been this like burden. And that's what she then went on to say. She's like, yeah, and I actually felt like I was destroying myself coming in to train after having done a 10-hour shift or whatever. And I was like, holy crap, that's not good. And to find out that she had been actually putting her hand up for so many extra shifts that were only like a 4-hour shift. Like it was like, on her Friday, for example, she normally isn't actually rostered on, right? But then she'd be like, oh yeah, I'll do that, 9 to whatever. And it was like, she was just constantly saying yes to stuff because the external pressure was there, right? She's a reliable worker. She's done it for 20 years, but like, she doesn't realize the impact that stress is having on her system. Now, me as an outsider, I looked on and was like, for the last 6 months, I'm like, man, you're working these crazy weeks of like 50 plus hours. Just imagine if you worked a 48-hour week or even a 38-hour week. Like, your pay's a little bit less. I get that. Like the money's obviously there, but it's also the fact that like, is that money worth the fact that you've got epilepsy that now flares up a lot more than it used to because of the stress? Is it worth the fact that you've put on 5 kilos of body fat because of the stress and the she's going through menopause as well. So I'm just like, all these things, I'm just like, you have all this shit going on with your system. And to be honest, your body has been trying to tell you for at least the last 12 months that you need to take some time off.
Just have a breather, eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And cool, man. So you recently completed, or you've been working through the push-up challenge. You want to tell us a little bit about that, man?
Yeah. So, I mean, the big thing with that is it's something that just gets people talking. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And again, guys,
why do you think that's so important, man?
Well, because people don't talk, right? Like we're being pushed towards using, technology and phones and screens and all this sort of stuff. Like even some of the guys in our coaching circle this week realized that, being able to go out and actually train people in a gym space for the first time in weeks or months was actually really good. Like they actually missed it like really, really much. Because I mean, they're all online coaches as well. And, it's to hear that message of them reaching out going, oh God, like, I need to talk about stuff a bit more often. Like that was really powerful. And that's why I'm doing the push-up challenge, right? Because it's something I can post on my story each day. And it's, it's an achievement, so to speak. But I think the greater achievement is just getting people to realize like some of the stats that they put out to us each day to remind us, the reason you're doing 120 push-ups today or 210 is because of this, this, and this. Like it is damning. Like I think it was like 1 in 4 people under the age of 21 are having like suicidal thoughts, but they've never reached out for help. Like those sorts of stats is the reason why I think this is something that should be at the forefront of people's minds, not a back page issue. I think it should be like people are hurting and people need to learn how to talk about it.
And I think that's it, man. And like, we do these challenges often, or you see a lot of people do these challenges and they do start these conversations. And, we have the Are You Okay Day, and it's a conversation starter. But one of the things you sort of touched on is that it's like, you can support it, but it's actually about living it as well.
Yeah. And that's something that, I've seen a few people mention this week. Obviously, the push-up challenge is a big broadcasted thing. There's a lot of people talking about it. It's trending, all that sort of stuff in the social spaces. But what happens once that's done? Like, I think that's another question people need to start asking themselves when they do take part in these challenges. Now, of course, they're doing it for the right reasons when they do it, like in the moment. But I think the overarching message needs to be like, cool, how are you going to keep that standard up to some degree once you've finished the push-up challenge or once you've finished the 5K a day walking challenge or whatever it might be, right? It doesn't matter on the challenge. It's like, how do we keep the message rolling out there so that it can become a year-long thing or just a daily habit of checking in on your friends? Like even for 2 seconds,
Yeah, that's it, man. And like for this, man, I think like one of the biggest things that holds people back is that uncomfortableness. Do you have any suggestions or any like ways that make it a little bit easier to either one, ask for help, or two, reach out and see if your friends are okay?
I think from a personal side of things, when you're looking at issues that you yourself might be trying to go through at the time, something I usually recommend to my guys is if you ever have a negative thought about something, I want you to actually write it down. And the reason for that isn't so that you remind yourself you've had that negative thought so you can have it again. The reason is that when it's down on paper, I've actually had some clients come to me with a list of things that are constantly like on their mind or making them feel like shit or whatever, or keeping them down, so to speak.
Yep.
And they've just walked in after class one day and literally just given me a piece of paper, but they haven't been able to verbalize it, right? Because like you said, it can be quite challenging to actually just speak about it. Whether they think it's weakness or uncomfortable or whatever, or both, or a bit of everything. And I find that that's a great little tip, because at least if someone's writing it down, like I said, it's getting it out of the head to start with. So that's a positive. But then that second step is that when they're ready, or if I happen to ask them, how's your day been? Or how'd you go with, writing stuff down? If at the very least, they can, like I said, just hand me a piece of paper without even needing to say anything at first, like I can then start working that conversation. Right. Like I've coached and talked to enough people that I've got little things that I can start weaving into conversation, not just bluntly call them out about anything, but it's just getting the idea of like, okay, cool. You are struggling with a few things and here's a couple of dot points. Okay. We can work on that. Right. Because again, and I'm sure you've probably had it, like the first thing is, I don't want to talk about it. Okay. That's cool. But if you were to talk about it, what's one thing that might be keeping you down? And that's usually a great way to just get someone to put something down on paper.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And like, just sometimes it's like that extra little question. What is, if there was something, what would it be?
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think just wording it differently. Like, again, words are powerful. And sometimes, like, I know you can't coach your partner, but like millions of times over the years, my very own wife, Beck, there's been things that I've talked to her about, whether it's nutrition, training, whatever, lack of sleep, stress, all these sorts of things. And I'll talk to her about stuff. And then all of a sudden she'll hear it worded slightly different from my mate, Brad or Cam or someone else. Yeah. I had that exact same conversation like 2 days ago. And she's like, oh, that makes so much sense. And then it just goes and clicks, right? And again, we know that, like we've all seen that as coaches, but for the everyday person, I think, sometimes if you can just reword it to, like you said, if there was something that could be bringing you down, what might it be? Because that actually gets someone to like start thinking instead of giving that autopilot response, as we know, which is, I don't want to talk about it, or nothing, I'm fine, Yeah.
No, absolutely, man. And I guess, man, just on this topic, I guess, what would be the 1 to 3 things that you would sort of say, hey, look, in terms of mental health, what would be a bit of a self check-in? And then maybe, if a couple of those things were giving you, I guess, like a red light, when's the time to reach out to a person?
Probably the 3 things I would look at is I usually try and bring it back to priorities, which my priorities triangle that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And there's generally 3 things in life that you're going to put your energy towards, which we know is relationship, career or job, and then your own physical and mental health. And if you can kind of ask yourself a question of, what makes me either angry, sad, depressed, stressed, so any of those sort of negative emotional factors, if there's any like one thing, and again, it doesn't have to be 20 things, just try and just have a look through your day or your week or whatever, and just try and assess like, okay, has there been anything this last week, let alone 24 hours, work related, that has made me feel any of those negative effects? Cool, write it down. And then do the same thing with physical and mental health. Cool. When I did squats this week, I was angry as fuck. Okay, write it down. Right. And again, because again, we know as coaches, aggression can be something that can be good to fuel a workout, but it can also be something really bad to kill progress as well, as we know. So again, write that shit down. And then again, with relationships, it's like, cool, has your best mate, blah, 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 been dumping all of their issues on you and that's made you feel like shit? Cool, write that down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think if you can, that's probably a really simple way, because it's just one step and it's like, cool, this, and this. And then the next step from that is like, cool, is this something that I would feel okay reaching out to someone that I confide in? So whether it's your best mate, whether it's your mum, your dad, you know, your coach, you know, go and see a counselor, ring Lifeline, you know, Beyond Blue or any of that sort of stuff. And could I actually at least pass that on to them somehow? Whether it is literally like, cool, here's my thing that I wrote down. I can't verbally say it to you because I'm uncomfortable for whatever reason, but like, this is in my head, you know? I think that's probably a really simple 2-step process that anyone could pretty much use, really. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool, man. And I guess, bro, in terms of all of this, like, what would your, I guess, parting thoughts like to be around this subject?
I know that very often I say a lot of things like, you know, it ain't weak to speak, and you throw all the cliches out there about trying to get people to open up. But I think probably, the biggest message for today is like, there is always someone that will listen. And again, it might not be the person you expect. You know, it might not be your Lifelines, your Beyond Blues, any of that sort of stuff. It might not be your coach. It might not be your, you know, even your wife, for example, or your loved ones. It could just be someone that you see every day that you just feel open about talking to, right? And it might be that one person that, you know, man, if I had to talk about the fact that like I can't poo today, like I can tell that person, right? Like, and you'll be surprised that that's the one person you can literally blurt out anything to them, because you know that there's no repercussions. They might just go, oh, that's interesting. You know, like, you know what I mean? Because I think that's one thing that a lot of people feel when it comes to getting rid of bad thoughts out of their heads, is they constantly are going to think, what are they going to say in return? And how's that going to make me feel worse potentially? Right? Like, am I letting them down? All these sorts of things. So that's where I think the big message today is like, the people that are there to help, like, they are there. Like, please believe me in that. Like, I don't care how bad you think life may be, or whether you're living on the street or whatever. There is always someone within 5 people, you know, and I mean like 5 people deep, that will be able to help. But I think writing your shit down, if you can't verbalize it, please try and write it down. Get it out of your head, because it is actually really powerful. I never thought that it would actually do any good a couple of years back. But when I started talking about the bad thoughts I used to have related to weight and the scales and things like that, because of my history with weight loss, it actually cleared my head around using scales. Like, I can step on the scales whenever I want now, and there's no dramas.
That's magic.
Whereas a couple of years ago, the thought was always in my head. Shit, what's the number actually going to be? I'm going to feel awful, right? Like, I'd already planned the outcome before I'd even stepped on them, you know? So I think that's probably the big thing. Like, if you feel like you can't find someone to talk to, try and at least, just at the very least, write your shit down, get it out of your head, and you will find at least some form of clarity.
I reckon that's a big one, man. And like, just that brain dump of like, get it on paper. I've actually been using a new journal lately. You can't see it, but
nice.
It's really good, because I've always heard about the practice of gratitude and that, but I've never actually done it, really, to be completely honest. But there's the question in here is like, you know, I am grateful for, you know, and then there's some really great questions at night time of like, wonderful things that happened to me today. And I know for a lot of people, just verbalizing that, hey, shit, maybe it was a terrible day in our heads, but if we write down a couple of good things that happened, make us like forcefully think about something great that happened. That's been really good for me. Like, it's been really helpful. And then you can write down, you know, 3 struggles that you've encountered, you know, and then it's like, put them on paper and then flip them to possible solutions for these struggles. You know, so you can start to work through it, and rather, you know, often the demon we make up inside our head is really in reality not as bad as we think once we get it down on paper. So
It's actually a little lamb. Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's just an annoying, loud little lamb that looks like a zombie. But
yeah. And you think it's this big horn demon. It's like,
yeah. No, I love it, Knoxy. And guys, like what? Look, we are here to, obviously help you guys chase better and open up some avenues and show you guys some spaces. But we actually want to create a conversation around all of this. And so if you have, if you do find any of this today, please do drop a comment, start the conversation with us, invite conversations with your friends, with your family members, and build, a little bit of a conversation around these topics so that, we can start these conversations and have some better conversations and obviously help more people along the way. And me and Knoxy are super keen to hear what you guys have to say, hear what you guys have to think, and obviously just to help you guys chase better as well.
Yeah, man, couldn't have said it better myself. And that's the thing, guys, like all of this stuff we talk about, it comes from experiences and conversations that we have with clients, people in our circles. Like it comes from people. So like if you guys have got stuff on your mind that you'd love us to talk about, like drop it in the comments, like Dylan said. And yeah, man, I can talk underwater, so I'll talk about anything. So if you've got a topic, hit us up. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Cool. Awesome, Knoxy. We'll catch you next week.
All righty. Peace.